Welcome to Heart-Based Medicine's Heart of Healthcare podcast, featuring Monica Elden, LMFT, integrative psychotherapy coach and trainer, and owner of Wellbeing Embodied, the power of voice dialogue for inner balance.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session, to this podcast episode, where I'm really pleased to meet and introduce two fantastic guests today, and we'll reveal in a second why two. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Monica Elden. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much for having me here today.
It's a great honor. And for everyone who doesn't know Monica is a coach, a psychotherapist, and corporate trainer. Monica has over 25 years supporting thousands of people in self-discovery and professional growth, mind, body, spirit integration. And her work synthesizes science-backed practices grounded in mindfulness and neuroscience for sustained resilience and well-being. She is an expert in designing experiential learning, where people take away high value in a short time frame. And companies that she's worked with include large companies, actually, the Bank of America and Anderson Consulting, Biogen, Kaiser Permanente, Oracle, Visa, Wells Fargo, and so on. So it has certainly a huge experience in working in mind-body medicine and in working on the inner balance of healthcare professionals, and as we've seen also in many other professional domains. So thanks a lot for joining us today. And we will today focus and kind of from this wealth of experience zoom into a very specific practice that you appreciate and that you've applied successfully and taught and trained in many different environments. And this is about voice dialogue. And before we go into this, I will just want to introduce Dr. Jacqueline Chan. So Dr. Chan is with us today, and she is a board-certified holistic medicine physician and very much involved in energy medicine. And so in many ways, she's a member of the Functional Medicine Institute and a member of the Academy of faculty of the Academy of Intuitive Medicine, and also a professor at the Energy Medicine University. And I think, Dr. Chan, if you allow, we will keep this a little secret of why you are a call for a little bit later into the call. So thanks again for joining. Really appreciate that you're both there. And Monica, help us understand, just to get started and to help us funneling in, help us understand, maybe just label for us, what is voice dialogue? What is your take on that?
Yes. So voice dialogue is a parts therapy, meaning that we actually are not comprised of just one person inside of us, but a multitude of selves inside. And let me give you a real life example with a physician I worked with some years ago to kind of give you a context so you can hear the possibility of the difference this kind of work could make for your listeners in their lives. So it was about 7 years ago. I did a workshop on voice dialogue and the psychology of selves with about 100 people. And there were a number of physicians in there that I started to work with. And one of them was an ER doctor in New Zealand and Australia who really had a passion to combine his passion of being a physician with his love of being a pilot. And yet to leave his secure job to become this traveling medic, he didn't have a path for that yet. But it was through the practice of voice dialogue that he found the ability to separate from that part of him that needed the secure future to take the risk to follow his dreams. And what he said out of the work was that I became the captain of my life. And more of his story is on my website, Wellbeing Embodied, if you want to look it up. But I just wanted to share that because really the possibility of this work for healthcare providers is from either preventing burnout or moving from burnout to a place of rejuvenation, moving from a place of being stuck in your career to a place of freedom. So thanks for letting me share that example. And I just wanted to maybe go into a couple of key points about voice dialogue.
Uh-huh. Sounds intriguing. No, I really want to know.
So voice dialogue was developed by two mentors of mine who were a husband and wife psychotherapist team. They developed it out of their relationship and starting around 1972 actually. I came to learn this practice in 1989 and it really changed my career. I was on the way to being an organization development consultant, and I felt that this work had such potency for my own life that I shifted my career to get a degree in psychotherapy and then also weave that into organizational work. One of the most potent aspects of voice dialogue is what I mentioned earlier, that if you think of yourself as an inner cast of characters, and each part of you that has a different value system, different beliefs, different perceptions, different way of seeing the world. So if you've ever been in conflict about something, how to proceed, a decision to make, and you're feeling unsure or stuck, like those are two parts of you in conflict battling it out.
Right. I'm all too familiar with this.
You're all too familiar. Yes, well, we all are. And so this practice, gives you a way to, as the physician said, be the captain of your life instead of having all of these parts sort of vie for control, which is what they generally do. And we all have these primary selves that we live out of. And these parts are our inner protectors. They're the parts that are familiar to us that we live in every day. So for people in healthcare, a big primary self would be the inner healer or a caretaker, right? As opposed to another part that you might not have as much familiarity in your life, which might be the part of you that takes great care of yourself. Right? So my experience of working with physicians and all people in healthcare, nurses, is that you're much more attuned to being the care provider than for being a caretaker. And so those are a beautiful example of two opposites. The part that takes care of yourself and the part that is focused on taking care of others, the healer, versus the self-care part. And that's really the essence of voice dialogue, that you are learning to see, identify the different parts of yourselves that are particularly opposites. So it's actually a practice that cultivates consciousness, because you have to expand your capacity to hold the tension of these opposites. Typically what we might do is just live out of the primary selves. Like, if you went to medical school, if you went to nursing school, you have a pretty big and competent inner pusher, inner driver, inner achiever, right? Mm-hmm. So an opposite to that part might be like a beach bum, for example. And we need both of those parts and so much more to be full and complete human beings.
I can feel the inner conversation. Yes.
Yes, I know it's nighttime for you, Jan, right now after your long day.
That's beautiful. It's a really great description. So yes, so that in a way, this is contributing to a sense of balance, right? You're saying this. It takes the consciousness to hold this, and that means somehow I need to be able. This is one way to create a balance. So it looks like I don't have enough of this, and I don't have enough of this, and I never have enough of anything. I can't do enough for my job, and I can't do enough for my family and my kids, and therefore I'm guilty for my kids and my spouse. And on the other side, I'm guilty for not being a better physician. And so like, oh, we're in this tension. And so here's a way to actually see that these are just two different parts that are providing a perspective. And both parts have a valid perspective. And I'm not either of those parts, but I can actually hold the tension between those. So I'm kind of part of that circle. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, beautiful. Yes, Jan.
Fabulous. I'm already feeling more balanced. Like that is amazing. So I can see that the value that this brings. This is really helpful. And you already highlighted a little bit in how this could be really useful for healthcare professionals specifically. So highlighting two parts. One is kind of the altruistic healer, and one is the self-healer. Heal thyself. And that is a neglected part.
Yes.
So where could this practice, I know we're going to go a little bit more into what this actually is and what it looks like and smells like, feels like, but voice dialogue is where would this apply? Would you like to give us an example first, or?
I think this would be, it would be great. I have another example that I think will make sense really within healthcare. So I had someone come to me, and he was in a lot of GI distress, a lot of pain, a lot of anxiety. He had a chronic illness that had been long gone, that had come back. And literally, this is the voice of the body speaking. So technically, we call this practice body dialogue, and it goes along with voice dialogue. But I facilitated him through the practice of listening to those symptoms. What did they have to communicate with to him? And he, in fact, had gotten so sick, and he was engaged to be married, and they had to call off the wedding. And what emerged was that this was his second marriage, and he had to complete some issues from his first marriage and communicate what he needed to his fiance. And he hadn't done that. And his body was literally stopping him from moving forward in his life until he could get to the core of what those issues were for him, which I facilitated in a session. And then he could take those to his fiance, have a heartfelt, honest discussion, and wouldn't you know, all of his symptoms disappear again. So that's the power that we have that we don't often harness, that can be linked to illness, and what's possible when you listen to the wisdom of your body. By the way, I think that was maybe 8 years ago. They're still happily married.
Follow-up study.
So one thing I want to highlight about what he did, and what everybody would do in this process, is that it cultivates an inner mindfulness, a state of being that is not any of these parts, but it's like a witness consciousness that is able to hold all of these parts without favoring one part over the other, right? Just like the way the director of the board would make sure that all of the needs of the organization were being attended to in making a decision. Or another metaphor you could use is learning to be a symphony conductor, and that all of your parts are like the instruments coming together in this harmony of gorgeous sound, right? But in order to do that, you have to listen in a curious and appreciative way to all of the different parts without judgment. And that's what we call an aware ego process. And it's called a process because, that time of being witness consciousness, we're not in that most of the time, right? But we learn how to step in, it's very key to disidentify from these primary parts so that we can cultivate the parts that we're not as familiar with, where actually our undiscovered creativity lies.
Beautiful. I can really see this. So when, the let's go to the hospital canteen for a minute. Okay, so when we go to the hospital canteen, what do we hear? So there's a lot of what we hear is like, I wasn't quite sure how to deal with this situation. It's like, okay, well, why didn't you do it this way? It's like, oh yeah, maybe I should have done it. Or, well, I do this always like this. So we get different roles among the physicians, and at different days in the hospital canteen, we take different roles. Sometimes we're the knower, sometimes we're the learner. And so in the group, we kind of switch these roles frequently. And then we talk about, hey, how's it going in life? Oh, I'm really tired today. And it was really difficult with the kids that didn't sleep all night. And then I had 5 in bed and so we get private stories interfering with professional life. So suddenly then the role as a father is interfering with the role as a physician, for example. Or we have actually different interests, particularly for residents, right? Or when you're early in your career, where you think like, oh, I could totally see myself going into, I'm interested in surgery, but at the same time, actually psychology is so interesting. So we have different kind of interests in different parts or elements of healing. Maybe, this is so interesting what I learned in medical school. What I would really like to see also, is there anything available in complementary medicine, for example? So we have all these different parts, and it's very difficult to not switch role and kind of speak from that role and not see the other roles. It's kind of very difficult from one role to see the other roles.
Yes.
Once I'm stuck in one role.
Yes, exactly. You know this so well, Jan.
So this is interesting. So when you are talking about this is actually this observer has the capacity to hold that balance and to be the conductor. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Wow, that's very interesting.
Yes, very key. Very key. And then this one other aspect about voice dialogue that really distinguishes itself from other parts work, and I think, soon we'll be letting the secret out of the bag why Dr. Chan is here.
Yes, I think it's time.
Is that the possibility of this work is that you step directly into these parts and experience them firsthand instead of talk about it. So instead of talking about this father, this inner self, I facilitate that you becoming that part, speaking directly, and therefore you get all of this firsthand information somatically. What does it feel like? How does the energy of that part feel different than your beach bum self, for example?
So thank you. So let's reveal why Dr. Chan is on the call. And so you have actually been coaching together. So you were coaching Dr. Chan as a medical professional. And I would be really curious to hear, and thank you, Dr. Chan, that you're willing to share your experience. I think this is really pivotal for our community to learn and to really see what this does and how impactful it can be. So maybe if you could share with us what the issues are and kind of what happened during the coaching and what the results were for you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jan. So essentially, Monica and I met a couple months ago, and the 3 parts that I was working with were, number 1, the protector, Number 2, the physician. And then number 3, it was like a kaleidoscope of the creative, intuitive, poet, dancer, teacher, healer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Monica asked me to physically get up from one position that I was in and move to a different chair or couch or a different position between each part. So I would actually fully be in one part and then get up when we were done with that and be in a different physical location. And what I found is that, the protector, I started with a protector who basically wanted to set up a safe space in the room for us, and was pretty kind of neutral. Like, I didn't really have much of an opinion. It just felt like, I'm here to protect the space as a therapy, therapy client relationship. And then the second one, the physician, was very practical, very sort of felt heavy. To be honest, I heard a lot the voice of my mom, who was the kind of very disciplinarian. My mom was the disciplinarian in the family. My father was more of the let's play. But my mom was like, did you get your homework done? Did you clean up your room? Did you do the dishes? Did you da 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 da? And so the physician was a heavier, denser feeling in my body and kind of very logical. And I would have to say a more masculine, quite masculine focused energy, very practical. And then when I moved into the healer, poet, dancer, creative teacher, I felt immediately kind of a lightness in my body, just more expansive, more joyous, kind of like the energy of when you're skipping, skipping versus hiking, just joyous. And the problem that I presented to Monica is I said, I've been practicing medicine for just over 20 years, and it's starting to feel dried up for me, like dry and heavy, even though I don't want to quit medicine. I love being a physician. I've spent so much time, I feel like, mastering my craft. And yet there's this just heaviness about it. And I find that sometimes I get sharp with people who are important in my life, my friends, family, and I'll text them, in a rude sort of a way. And it's always when I'm at work and I'm under pressure or I feel overburdened. And I'm not having fun. I'm just kind of not having fun. And what I really wanted was to have more creativity and lightness, and bring the creative person in me, the more joyous person, allow her, and she was like distinctly feminine, allow her to be in my medical practice. And I had no idea how that was going to happen. And so what happened is, simply by, I think, the physical movement of my body from one location to the other and really being in that role turned up the volume on those 3 different roles. And it allowed me to listen to certainly the intuitive creative teacher kaleidoscope one way more than I ever had before. And the results were pretty profound. And I don't even really know how they happened. It felt almost like kind of like magic. But as a result, what happened is, within about probably 2 weeks, the type of patients that I started seeing shifted. And I started I had a few hour-long patient visits instead of half an hour or shorter. And I didn't know how to promote that part of my practice, but I started getting a lot more of these hour-long appointments, which I actually thoroughly enjoyed. I found myself laughing at work. And then I decided to offer a class to some of my patients. And it took me 1 day for it to fill and sign up. It was like no problem at all. Like, my patients were totally on board. So I was exposing a more creative side of myself, which was in energy medicine. And And then the other amazing thing that happened as I was teaching this class, and I was teaching about the different chakras and the throat chakra, which is about communication. I had a 6-year-long, somewhat stressful relationship with my boss at work, where I didn't really feel, I felt a little overly controlled, micromanaged. And I know that his job is very hard, and he was doing a good job of it on the whole, but I didn't feel really seen for my gifts, and I felt kind of overly blamed. And he apologized to me out of the blue, like completely out of the blue, and started sending me patients and referring me people. And and that alone freed up so much energy, because was really battling with this. Like, I can't really be myself working for him. And it was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it just kind of, that just resolved, So it was really pretty amazing.
Oh, that's very deep. That's very profound, right? So that's really,
Yeah.
it allowed you to go, it's more than a kind of mind map. This is not just a mind map and figuring out the pros and the cons of one way versus the other, but it's really going kind of deep and sourcing very deeply from within you what your direction is. And as soon as you were more in your own balance, you could actually express more authentically than you could ever do before. Wow, that is beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Monica.
Not everybody always sees results quite as quickly. Jacqueline and I had some sessions prior to that over the last couple of years, and also she's just extraordinary with her capacity. So it's really an honor, to work with you as well. And I remember that you told me also something about, like, within a month, 70 to 80% of your patients were the kind of patients you wanted to be working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It's just extraordinary. And also in your personal life, something opened up as well.
Yes. I was so kind of, I would say, overwhelmed and dried up that I just couldn't see how I even really had space for the type of intimate relationship that I really wanted in my life. And that actually unfolded for me with somebody that I'd known for for about 13 years. So that was pretty amazing. That just kind of happened. And so I feel like I would call it my joy gauge has increased dramatically. So yeah, I'm grateful.
Oh, so beautiful. When we're sourcing deeply what happens. And so this is a beautiful, very powerful example for what this voice dialogue could actually do.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. So Monica, we're now talking about this, and you describe what it is, and also Shakti Chan, you describe what this is, and what it feels like, and what the process looks like. But this is describing the experience is a little bit like describing somebody what sugar tastes like if you stick your finger in it. But unless you actually do, you actually don't know what it really means. It's like with so many practices, unless you just go ahead and practice, you can't really fully appreciate what it is. So possibly here's a little kind of today's conversation has given a little flavor for what it could be and how impactful it could be. And I guess a full session, if I understand you correctly, Monica, is like at least an hour where you're really diving deep. Is that correct?
Yes, because you really want to get the felt sense, the experience of those different opposite selves that you're working with. Mm-hmm. And we need to have conversation initially to set it up as a pre-session, and then do the session, and then go into the witness part to integrate the learning, right? And this is how it's different from traditional talk therapy. It's really an embodiment practice, somatic experience. And this is where the power of transformation comes in, Because it's, as you were saying, it's really quite profound beyond the sort of intellectual understanding.
And Jacqueline, when you're thinking about this today, how do you see this in your life now? So there was a moment, sort of state A, and there was the coaching, then there was the voice dialogue work, and then there was the kind of the life after that, if you like. And is this a one-time thing happening, or do you actually kind of inside yourself, are these dialogues still going on as a conscious process? Is this like ongoing work in yourself?
Well, for me, really, it was a one-time thing. And what it gave me was my intention. And intention has a tremendous power to it. So it gave me this intention of, I really want to bring this other part of me that's more joyous and light and feminine into my work. And that's really important because I got to see how kind of dried up and mechanical, and even sometimes I came across as bitter or rude as the physician. And so I really got to see that clearly, and it helped me create my kind of will or determination, your intention and then your will and determination to have it be better. And that got really crystallized for me, quite clear.
Excellent. Beautiful. Thanks a lot. So I think if you want to find out more about what this voice dialogue is about, there is a little bit more background information on this on Monica's webpage, wellbeingembodied.com. And also Monica has provided some pre-practices, so some kind of pre-work to sessions. And they are available on the Heart-Based Medicine website in the Care Lab. So thanks a lot for making that available, Monica, for sharing this. And we will very soon have you with us in the Heartful Half Hour, so that we will actually go a little bit deeper and then actually get a first-hand taste of that sweetness.
Yes, and I'll also give you just in addition to my website where people can go, because I do international sessions, with people. But people might want you might want to find someone in your area, so I can provide a way to find out some more about that. And just to leave people with a tidbit of one thing that you could take away and start doing today is ask yourself, when you are thinking something, step back and say, who in me is saying that? Who's talking? Because that already has you step out of those primary selves and get a little distance, which is what you need in order to make a change.
Wow, very sweet, very short, very powerful. Thanks a lot on that note. Thanks a lot for joining today. Thanks a lot for sharing your experiences, for sharing your wisdom, and we'll see you in the community interacting as teachers, as faculty, as participants. Welcome. Thank you.
And Dr. Jahan, I just really want to thank you too, because you're just so open and willing to share your experience and for the benefit of others. And I think that's really extraordinary, because people can make use of it. Jan, do we have a moment that I could make the link for how people could use this for their patients?
Sure.
Okay. Very briefly, I want to say that if you've got patients who are experiencing depression, anxiety, if you have chronic cases where the patient isn't getting better, perhaps they become over-identified with the part in them that's sick. And isn't that interesting? Because not all of us, when you go in and talk to the body, not all of the parts are actually sick. Yeah. So I can help people to identify with their well-being and to shift out of that chronic illness sort of emotional state. So if you've got complex cases or you're not seeing results, or if a patient has come in and told you they've got a lot of change or transition going on in their life, it can add to the complexity of the case. These are all great ways that voice dialogue can make a difference in your patient's quality of life and well-being.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very beautiful. If you want to know more, wellbeingembodied.com. Monica Elden, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Jacqueline Chatton, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Jen.
This has been a Heart-Based Medicine production. Thanks for listening.